And welcome to another edition of Mining Now. This one from the CIM convention, and it's really buzzing here. We're right in the middle of the convention. And it's my pleasure to be joined by Christy Smith and Ellen Reyes of Falkirk Environmental. And I want to start out with a little bit about your backgrounds. Christy, how did you end up at Falkirk, and what's your personal story?
Well, I've been in the industry over 25 years. I've worked for government, for proponents, and for consultants throughout my time. I've got an undergrad in First Nation Studies, which seems a bit weird because I'm from Comox First Nation,
Okay.
should know. Um, and I have a master's in business, really to one of the things that I identified early on in my career is that there was a lack of opportunities, especially in partnerships with respect to economic opportunities for Indigenous groups.
Yeah.
So I went into my master's of business to try and link those pieces together. Yeah, and Falkirk, well, it was back in, I think, 2014. Myself, Jen Turner, Max Brownhill, Mike McPhee, we were all working on the Red Mountain project. And we identified uh, back then that we really saw a bunch of gaps in that process. And in 2019, we came together, and Mike, Max, and Mike are the founding partners, and I came as a supporting senior vice president to form Falkirk. So yeah, here we are today.
So when you say gaps, I go off on a tangent sometimes, but
That's
you
okay.
say gaps, and I'm interested in that. Is that gaps in community engagement, gaps in knowledge sharing between groups, or communication? Could be a range of
It was
things.
a range of things. So obviously my specialty is like the human environment side, socioeconomics, Indigenous relations, negotiations. And then of course Mike, Max, and Jen have different backgrounds. So we were identifying like better ways to do things through that process, and then identified that we could come together and pull all those pieces together and actually create a value added solution.
Okay, we're gonna get back to that in a
Okay.
minute because that really interests me. Ellen, what's your story? How did you end up with Falkirk?
Oh, well, I'll start a little bit more at the beginning. So I am an environmental health specialist with the community health and well-being team. I'm also a registered professional biologist in BC. I was awarded my designation in July of last year. And so how I started at Falkirk, I'm actually a recent hire. I started my position September 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to ask you about the history of
No, you
what it was like 10 years ago at
no.
Falkirk or anything. Okay.
But I do have experience working with First Nations communities. I did work at Stallion Nation for about 3 years before I joined Falkirk.
Yeah. So let's get into Falkirk
Mm-hmm,
because it's it's an environmental consulting
mm-hmm.
group, but it's much more than that. You know, when I start to look at the background and what you guys are doing. So I don't know who wants to kick things off, and let's talk about Falkirk.
Yeah, I mean, it's the collective group is, I guess, we attract people that have the same values as us,
Yeah.
which is a really unique set of circumstances to be able to work in a team that understands and values the same things you do. So I can speak, specifically to our area, which is human environment, Indigenous engagement, and Ellen works in community health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really strong team with the same like perception on projects and an ability to be adaptive and I think innovative is a really strong part of our team. So we're like, we might come into a project and no project is the same. And we're like, this isn't the right solution here. We're trying to stick a square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's figure this out. And a lot of times we've been lucky to work with the nations and, other partners and be able to come down to the root cause of like what we're trying to solve and be able to provide an outcome that may look different,
Mm-hmm.
but it works for the community as well as industry. So
Let's talk about our Heavy Industry World Tour brought to you by Savannah Equipment, supplying mining equipment worldwide. And Corporate Traveler Canada, helping companies travel the globe simpler, faster, easier. We are heading to events across North America and Australia and filming episodes on location. Email us at info@crownsman.com to be part of Crownsman's Heavy Industry World Tour. Did you know cementitious binders can be responsible for up to 70% of the total GHG footprint of mine backfilling processes? Now you can replace up to 50% of the binder in your mine backfill operations with Graybond, Graymond's new low-carbon cementitious binder. This lime-based alternative binder maintains a 40 to 70% lower GHG footprint compared to typical cement and can adapt to varying mine conditions without compromising performance. Learn more about Graybond at graybond.com. Make the most of your broadband network by adding mission-critical voice with Tasta's PTT. Trust Tasta Americas for flexible solutions that fit your needs and integrate seamlessly with data networks and devices. Take advantage of your existing broadband network such as LTE, 5G, and/or Wi-Fi to provide secure, reliable voice communications with their on-premise solution. Tasta Americas, your communication and safety partner. Visit tastaamericas.com or follow them on LinkedIn to learn more.
You know, when you talk about your team having common values, and do you find that what I found in my career is that you also attract clients with similar values, and is that what you're experiencing?
Yeah, and I think not only attract clients with the same values, but we choose to work with clients with the same values. So if we were misaligned in any way, I think we would have a hard conversation, like the founding partners and myself and others, to say, like, is this a good fit?
Yeah.
If this doesn't align with our values, this is not why we started Falkirk. We started Falkirk to work in the space that we wanted to work in.
And I would venture to say that in this day and age, if there's someone trying to build a mine that is not aligned with your values, they're going to have a hard time building a mine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so your client engagement, I'm talking about clients now, it goes beyond, I think, the typical consulting arrangement from what I read about how you engage with clients. And
Yeah, I think, well, the area that we really work well in is being the owner's representative. So we come in very value added, solution orientated, and come in and support companies as if we're working for that company. And I think that provides us a really unique view. First of all, we're loyal, right?
Yeah.
We're technically the part of the team. And we have the owner's best interest at hand. So we're supporting, like, sometimes we're on a project management role where we're also supporting like costs and making sure everything's done well, and then that they're going through the process of the environmental assessment, and our team leads all of that.
Yeah.
And
so
then
is this at pre-feasibility or feasibility stage, or is this actual construction, or where do you usually get involved?
So it depends. So in our area, Ellen and my area, we'll sometimes come in with a junior exploration, and they haven't even staked the ground.
Okay.
Like, we
It's
can,
very early in the
to support engagement strategies and support them with the negotiations or dialogue. And then from there, usually the larger companies will have an engagement team. And it's appropriate for them to be able to do that on their own. So the larger industry partners that we work with, we're usually doing baseline studies, or like socioeconomic baseline studies, or human health, which is Ellen's specialty. And then we're supporting them through the baseline as well as development of the environmental assessment chapters, like the actual assessment piece.
Attention builders, we've got everything you need to know about the grit and grind of the construction world in one show. The Construction Show is where you can share your expert techniques and strategies to help keep the crew strong and construction sites secure. From foundational tips, industry trends, safety strategies to advanced equipment and machinery. Be part of the voice of construction. Book your episode and showcase your company to millions worldwide. Visit crownsman.com. CIM is Canada's leading technical institute dedicated to the sustainability of our industry. Members enjoy professional growth opportunities through CIM libraries, publications, webinars, societies, and the job board. Experience the CIM community firsthand at the Conference of Metallurgists, August 19th to 22nd, ICARD, September 16th to 20th, and the CIM Health and Safety Conference, October 6th to 8th. Visit CIM.org for more information and join CIM today.
I talked about engagement with clients, but probably engagement with communities is the more interesting aspect
is.
of this process. And uh, to give you a little context, I think it was 20 years ago, we did our first partnership with Kitikmeot to work at Diavik Mine and later at Hope Bay and different places. But I found traditionally the industry spent a lot of time trying to explain to communities what they were doing and not a lot of time listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking for some validation on my theory here. Is that what you found? And obviously you guys have to do some listening.
I think I spend a lot more time listening than talking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I try to do in this show, but that doesn't work. But yeah, so, and the other thing I found is that in our industry, we have this preconceived notion that each group wants something similar.
No,
And I found each community is
It's different.
very different in
Mhm.
many ways.
like even with in the same nation, like each community can have very different needs and different capacity. So I would not agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the places we've struggled as an industry.
Mhm.
I think we're getting better at it.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we are. But early on, when we were trying to engage, I think we spent a lot of time explaining why this would be so good for you
Mm-hmm.
and not listening about what you really need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a interesting um area. I don't know if Mike mentioned, but we wrote a book called Weaving Two Worlds.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a book on economic reconciliation, and the number one rule is learn how to listen. You might think you're good at listening, but the majority of people are only listening to respond, right? You're trying to think of, even right now, you're like, what's my next question? I'm going to go here with this or here
Yeah,
with
that's my
this.
job.
It is your
right
job,
now.
right? But it's really hard to sit and listen intently and pick out nuances that may not be actually heard. Like there's a lot to say in silence. And so we as our team have to learn to sit and just wait
Mhm.
sometimes. And we sit in silence when we're engaging because sometimes that silence is just a respect to an elder while they process or things like that. So yeah, super important.
So to get back to Falkirk now, I get off on a tangent sometime. I'll try and get back on the right track here.
Mhm.
But when you're taking on a client, can you tell us a bit about the process from when you first meet with the client and getting to know their project and then understanding their challenges? I'm sure every client is different, but maybe you can share with us an example of a group that you've dealt with.
So normally, in specifically for our I wouldn't call it a department, it's kind of colonial, but our area of expertise, we've worked with both the mining sector, like the proponent, and the nation.
Yeah.
So sometimes we're working for the nation and sometimes we're working for the proponent. So our client interface and how we work with communities versus Skeena or
Yeah.
Newmont
Yeah.
is very, very different.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I think it's very clear with a company, they can identify where they may have gaps or need to fill a gap with a consultant or be like, okay, I need a water study over here.
Mhm.
And so they can kind of path that piece out. And that's a different part of the relationship building. When we're working with the nation, sometimes they may not know, they may know what they need, or they may not quite understand the process, or they may need something that, or we might find something in that relationship as we're building the relationship, an area of need that they didn't even identify. So it's a little bit of a difference. I do think though, as we're working with clients, like on the proponent side, we do similar things where we're like, you actually kind of need this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Help people through
Mhm.
things. Yeah.
So when and do you look at I heard this term capacity mapping. Like, do you look at the community and what they can do to help the project in terms of people, in terms of companies, in terms of different things?
Well, when I worked at Stallion Nation, I noticed that was that was a concern too. I don't want to say it's a concern, but I know my experience with working with Stallion Nation, it's the capacity building, and it's not easy to do
Yeah.
that. And we did have to sometimes bring in other consultants and other groups in to help us build that knowledge piece,
Yeah.
because we did not have that internally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to flag
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people are like, oh, the community just doesn't have
No,
capacity, doesn't have capacity. But the actual fact of the matter is that the community is taking care of
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of members, possibly
Mhm.
managing day-to-day deaths, life,
Mhm.
births, just everything like that. And then somebody's coming to them and saying, come participate, or you
Mhm.
need to review this document. And there's so much going on
Mm-hmm.
in a community that there's just not enough time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So people would draft up an impact benefit agreement or some type of
Mhm.
arrangement, and then later on say, well, we gave you the opportunity, but
And I also find sometimes the timelines are not realistic as well. Like
Yeah.
only having like 60 to 90 days to review a document, that's not a sufficient amount of time.
yeah,
Mhm.
especially when it's, and I don't know, like the specialties a year in,
Mm-hmm.
I would need a year to review those documents.
Yeah.
I don't know about that stuff,
Mhm.
but so there's some technical information in there too,
Mhm.
Hmm.
which a lot of communities don't have the
They don't
expertise
have
to
to.
say, is this good or not?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is, the proponent has money, maybe has an agreement to like actually fund some supported
Mhm.
position.
Yeah.
But overall, most nations are underfunded,
Yeah.
especially in the natural resource sector. Like it's just not a funded part of a nation.
Yeah. Establishing either training or the
Mhm.
capital to start a company to do something, all those things
Mhm.
require time, like
They
you said,
take
Alan,
time. Yeah.
but also money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the like procurement policies and or processes too, like there's not enough lead time for when an RFP comes out for a nation to quickly joint venture, get everything organized, and then get members in there to have something showcase as successful. We've been really, really lucky, and a couple of our projects where we have really, really good examples of how we like held off, allowed the nation to joint
Okay.
venture and then
Yeah.
have that process. But in larger companies, you have to have a procurement policy that's open
Yeah.
and fair, right? Where sometimes that gets lost. Like if a nation joins up with one company that doesn't get it, then how does that work, right? So
That's a really good point because so my career's been in contracting. When we get a request for tender, that's what we do all the time, and yet we still find really rushed to respond.
mhm.
So if that's our area of expertise and we're rushed to respond, I can just picture now, I had an epiphany there when you said that giving something like that to community that isn't an expert in mine development or some other area and saying, you have a chance to bid on it too.
Mhm.
Well, you don't really have much of a chance if you've got 30 or 60 days to bid it,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to establish partnerships and you have to get people on board that understand the work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
The other thing I think that's really misleading too is like, um, somebody will say, oh, you can bid or you can do the house cleaning of the camp or do some camp catering. That's only great if the mine is running.
yeah,
What companies need to do is create legacy. So help the communities build capacity
yeah,
to create knowledge and legacy that goes beyond the mine life. So they can leave and they can go work here and they can work here. So really being strategic in how you invest in community is super important.
So that brings up a question, and I've run into this before. It's kind of a catch-22 because you train people in the community to
Mm-hmm.
work at the mine or to do certain things. Now that gives them opportunity to leave.
Yeah. It's
So now you've got an exodus of people from your community.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to give people opportunity, but somehow you want to build your community too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Ellen, if you've seen that experience or
Yeah, I
challenge.
I have seen that experience and I have seen that challenge, and I don't really know if I have the answer to
Yeah.
resolving it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that's when we talk about building a road to create access to a remote community. Well, all of a sudden that road sounds like a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe groceries are cheaper, but it's also a road for people
To leave.
to leave
Mm-hmm.
or other things not good
Mm-hmm.
to come in. So there's lots of different challenges
Mhm.
that and I'm generalizing when I say the mining community sees these as, well, this will be great. You know, you've got a road in now and all these opportunities, sometimes don't see the other side of the coin.
Yeah. But you also, um, like that's one angle. But if you were a community, um, like the Tall Town or Nishka, where mining is quite prevalent,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden took it away, like people have moved back home to work in the industry, right?
Okay, okay.
There is that opposite
Yeah.
perspective as well. Like, um, you
So
know,
that's
another
different.
mine site is going to put pressures on the community up there
Yeah.
potentially, right?
Yeah.
The housing and different things.
Yeah.
So it is a different perspective. And then the actual like if a mine or a mill shuts down, the impacts on health and community health and well-being are actually substantively more
Yeah.
than a mine coming in. So
Is that because of is that economics? Is that money that's disappearing that was there before to help with,
um
or it's more than that?
I think as individual, that
Yeah.
kind of stat I was talking about, like, you know, you have work, you have security, there's that Maslow's theory of needs,
Yeah.
right? And then you take it away. And if you
So it's the mental health involved with any of us losing our job, or
absolutely,
now
yeah.
you don't have any place.
Yeah.
It's not just losing a job.
Mhm.
It's like, where do I go now?
Well, and you get used to a livelihood too,
Yeah.
right? And so that's where
Yeah.
that's why it's such a big difference.
So in environment, Ellen, I want to delve into some of the things you're doing, because I think your background's really interesting with the biology. My family's into, anyway, I couldn't get them into engineering, but that's another story. But how is your kind of unique backgrounds meshed together for you in your career?
Wow. I actually first started off working at an environmental engineering consulting firm,
Okay.
and I did gain quite a bit of technical skills, but that Indigenous engagement and relations piece that was really missing,
Okay.
and I did not get that. So I after that position, like I have started gaining that type of experience working in Indigenous engagement
Yeah.
and relations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so you got the technical part first.
Yes.
I always talk about process and
Mhm.
culture, right? There's the technical part, but that's the easy part, right?
Yes, it is.
It's
Actually, I
it's the
find that
people part that's the
I find the technical part is actually a lot easier compared to the Indigenous relations and engagement part.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's I don't want to generalize engineers because I'm one of them, but the technical aspect, we seem to focus on that quite a bit.
Yes.
We're starting to gravitate towards the human aspect
Mhm.
in our industry, I believe, and you guys are a big part of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if everybody is good at it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
I
You
know
have to have a
I
personality.
know everybody's not.
And you have coming back down to those tools of listening
Mhm.
and applying creating safe spaces for conversation, being trauma informed. Like our team has got a really unique we're well trained. We
Yeah.
make sure we are to be able to work in the spaces we do because it's with people.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
Well,
quite different.
approaching a situation where you're not intimidating, either on purpose or not knowing it. That whole empathy aspect is, I think it's challenging for everyone, to be quite
Mhm.
honest. But I'm hopeful that the mining industry is getting better at it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think that people are identifying they need it. It's just maybe they don't it takes a really strong leader to recognize that that might not be their position.
Or they don't know, even
Yeah.
if you want to do it, you don't know how to.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys are there for, to help.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to something you said, because you have clients that are mining companies, but you also have clients that are communities.
Mhm.
We talked a little bit about the approach for the mining company. So you're engaging with a community. Do you just listen, or is there more than that?
Usually, in our cases, the communities have reached out,
Okay.
because they've heard of the unique way that we've been doing things, which is really taking an organic approach. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of, actually a lot of Falkirk work is through word of mouth.
Okay.
Yeah. And being innovative in a space that
Yeah.
we're allowed to be
Yeah.
innovative in.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you're really, maybe it's a bit cliche. You're really looking for win-wins, when it doesn't matter who your client is.
Mhm.
You need to develop that win-win, or it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want the best, like, you want to be able to assess the project and show the impact on the communities and show the true impact, right? So I mean, everything that we do doesn't matter. We're assessing and we're supporting and we're ensuring that there's mitigations available to mitigate the project effects, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That are appropriate. And that's the thing, it's not just your cookie cutter approach, it's actually listening to the community and actually identifying
Yeah.
how to address those needs.
So there's some obvious implications with regard to environmental in this. I'm a safety guy. Okay. I'm a big proponent of we've been working on safety in our industry for a long time. There's some safety aspects to what you do as well,
Mhm.
both in terms of traumatic injuries and mental health. So can you elaborate on that?
So in the EA process, like I'll give an example of what I've seen. So an environmental risk assessment, it can meet the regulatory it can meet the regulatory requirements when assessing an exposure to contaminants. So this will end up resulting in this can result in negligible or minor effects to the community or the environment. But when you look at the other side, when you look at the community, they still may believe that there might be impacts to their way of life or their culture.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's a perceived safety
It's a perceived
issue,
safety issue.
which could have been driven by a real issue at one point.
Mhm.
You solve the problem, but
Mhm.
people are still
Yes.
okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of like uh testing the blueberries over here
Mhm.
and showing that there's no uptake of mineralization and that
Yeah.
they're safe to eat. But the concept of, well, I've been told that this whole site's contaminated.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I wouldn't go berry picking alongside a
Yeah.
railway,
Mhm.
a railroad, because of the spraying of, whatever, even though they might test okay.
I'm thinking of the movie Aaron Brockovich, where
Yes.
Yes. Mhm. That's what I was thinking about.
contaminated.
Yeah. Mhm.
You could clean everything up and it would all be good, but people are still thinking
Mhm.
big company.
Mhm.
They're just telling us what we want to hear.
Want to hear.
Mhm.
So So what's your next step? Boy, that's challenging.
Yes, it is
Gotta-
challenging.
yeah,
I think
You got to build some trust there.
with our team, this is why having both the Western science and the Indigenous knowledge in the EA process is so important,
Yeah.
and not just having that one-sided narrative.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's where our team has that's where our team is strong in.
I can see that, because if you have just one of the pieces,
Mhm.
either one,
Mhm.
the indigenous knowledge or the technical, but
Mhm.
you have to have both.
You have to have
It's not going to work.
Mhm.
Okay, well that's because whenever I see safety, I dive in there, but that's a very interesting
Yes.
concept, and call it um, we have a name for it in our industry, a perceived safety
Mhm.
factor, where sometimes we create a safety factor greater than what's needed to create a level of comfort for the operators.
Mhm.
Anyway, uh, uh, so I'm going to ask you if there's something that you want to leave with the audience before we wind up the show. So if there's something in particular.
Yeah, I wanted to touch base on integration of Indigenous knowledge into the Western science world. Just because it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I think there's a perception that it's easy. but when you're trying to integrate in doing it the right way, the knowledge into a like it can be oral knowledge into a written form, or a written document into environmental assessment, you have to be very, very careful.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that people are just extrapolating out of context narrative and putting them into the document and saying, yay, I've done it, I've integrated Indigenous knowledge. And the truth is, it's not well received,
Yeah.
especially from the nation. So that integration has to be done with care and a lot of thought. And everybody's on the timeline, everybody's trying to get things done, and then you have this new world of, you have to have a holistic assessment, you have to have integration of knowledge, and it's the how to do it, but it's also being ethically, it's an ethical thing, right? Doing it in the right way. I've just recently seen a creation story about a bear, but the creation story is not about the bear, it's about the actual outcome, it's the values that you learn from this story, but it said bear, so they stuck it in the wildlife chapter.
Oh, okay.
So it's super important to
That's like taking an Aesop fable on the rabbit and the
yes,
tortoise and the hare and putting it into
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, so we have to be very cognizant, and I think that's that is one of Falkirk and our team's really strong points, is doing it well and understanding and reading and understanding the context of where the knowledge is coming from, making sure it is Indigenous knowledge, because it can be driven out of a book too, and then applying it in a manner that's respectful.
Yeah. There's some wider implications there. I mean, the mining industry is global, and if you're taking a North American approach to a mine in West Africa or a mine in Peru, it's a different culture, and you have to realize that it is a different culture and respect it, and the training is going to land in different ways. And anyway, as you talk, I'm thinking about the wider implications of this, because there's some interesting things you guys are doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got to be aware too that this becomes a public document.
Yeah.
Right? So you're taking Indigenous knowledge, putting it in essentially a colonial process, and then publicizing it.
Yeah.
So
To a wider group that doesn't understand
that's right.
either the origins or the importance.
That's right. So it has to be done well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay. Ellen, anything you want to leave with us?
I would want to leave that the Indigenous engagement in the mining sector, it has come a long way. There has been positive changes, because historically First Nations, they were not part of the process.
No.
And we have come a long way, but we still have a lot more work to do. It's just I've still noticed that Indigenous knowledge, it's still not weighted the same.
Yeah. It's and again, it's that maybe it's just we've been so focused on technical for so long
Yeah.
that that the culture part of it, we see that in safety as well. But thank you guys so much. I'm learning. I learned on all these shows, but this was, I think I noted 3 epiphanies.
oh,
this show.
good.
That's 2
That's
more
all
than my
good,
average
yes.
epiphany show. So that was really good. So thank you to our audience for attending another edition of Mining Now. And we've been talking with Christy Smith and Ellen Reyes of Falkirk Environmental Consulting.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for joining us on another edition of Mining Now.